of Fan Central.
Talking to the people at the heart of the top sporting stories. Hear from your favorite sportsmen and women and the administrators who work tirelessly to make it all happen. It's live sports talk.
I've written an entire article.
Yes.
Looking at all the major issues every Tuesday at 9 p.m. It's Fan Central.
The internationally acclaimed On Stage with Winford Williams.
At a new time, Saturdays at 8 p.m. on CVM TV.
So much more than entertainment.
Every dream conquered is another dream gained. I land and I fly again like a jet plane. Headed straight in your direction, 'cause I'm wiser, one step closer. I'm winning 'cause I work so hard, and the music keeps on playing, and the people never say we are march up the night. Oh, what a feeling! Don't stop dreaming. Keep on believing in the power of the feeling. Whatever you want, take a chance. Song in your heart, step in your dance. You got a spark, don't put it down. Shine your lights on.
25 teams, one dream. The first ever Popeyes Challenge Cup competition, this David versus Goliath tournament. The Popeyes Challenge Cup, Wednesday, May 13 at Draxhall Sports Complex. Gray's Inn versus Duncan's United at 4:30 p.m., followed by Limehall versus Wi-Fi United at 7:45 p.m. It's the Popeyes Challenge Cup, Wednesday, May 13 at Draxhall Sports Complex, live on CVM.
Old age, new risk. That's what we're talking about tonight as we discuss pensions. Because for years, retirement in Jamaica has often been treated as a personal issue, a private matter, something people would get to later. But tonight, the country may be confronting a harder reality. Jamaica is getting older. The labor market is changing. More people are working on contract. More people are operating outside traditional employment structures. And many workers are reaching middle age without adequate retirement protection. At the same time, the government is now moving toward auto-enrollment into pension schemes, a major policy shift designed to expand coverage. But the conversation no longer ends there, because Hurricane Melissa has also created a massive reconstruction bill. And Prime Minister Andrew Holness has now indicated that pension-linked capital could play a role in helping to finance national rebuilding. So, tonight the questions are larger than retirement. Can Jamaica build a modern pension culture in the middle of a cost of living crisis? Can contract workers and informal workers realistically be protected? And can retirement-linked capital help build the country without undermining public trust? I'm Jodie Ann Quarry, and this is Lead Story Prime. Tonight we look at old age, new risk, the coming demographic reckoning, and the fight for Jamaica's pension future. And to give us background and a full understanding of what we're dealing with when we discuss pensions and the concerns, we now have with us Akeem Arett.
Thank you, Julian. This is not simply a discussion about retirement. It's a discussion about whether Jamaica is financially prepared to survive its own demographic future. For decades, Jamaica's pension system has largely functioned as a privilege of formal employment. Public sector workers, major private sector employees, and a relatively small group of formally attached workers have had structured retirement pathways. But the Jamaican labor market has changed faster than the pension architecture designed to support it. If you work on contract, if you work seasonally, if you are self-employed, the architecture of the current system was not built for you. And many younger and older Jamaicans are attempting to survive an escalating cost of living crisis with a little capacity to think about old age at all. The International Labour Organization estimates that informal and contract employment accounts for over 40% of Jamaica's workforce. Agriculture, tourism, domestic work, the informal economy, these are not edge cases in Jamaica's labour market. They are the labour market. As of 2024, only 11.63% of Jamaica's employed labor force is enrolled in an approved private pension plan. That figure has not grown in 20 years. In fact, it is failing. In 2023, coverage stood at 11.79%. By 2024, it had dropped to 11.63%. Not because fewer people are working, but because employment is growing faster than pension participation. Every time Jamaica adds a new worker to the labor force, the odds are roughly 9 to 1 that worker has no pension. Yet the demographic clock continues to move. It means most Jamaicans are still expected to rely on the National Insurance Scheme, the NIS, personal savings, family support, or continue to work well into old age. But the country they are growing old inside is also changing. People are living longer, birth rates are declining, and the working age population is not growing at the same speed as the retired population. That creates pressure not just on retirement systems, but on healthcare, households, public spending, and younger family members expected to help support aging relatives. And just as those pressures are building, the government has now indicated that auto-enrollment into pension schemes is coming. The idea is simple. Instead of asking people to sign up for retirement savings, they would be automatically enrolled unless they choose to opt out. The pension industry has wanted this for years because internationally auto-enrollment has been shown to increase participation. But Jamaica's labor market creates a different problem. Who exactly gets enrolled in an economy where so many people now work on contracts, as freelancers, as consultants, or in informal arrangements? And if someone works 3 short-term jobs in a year, who is responsible for their retirement security? That contradiction is now colliding with another national crisis. The devastation caused by Hurricane Melissa has created a reconstruction challenge far beyond the scale of public financing currently secured by the government. Prime Minister Dr. Andrew Holness has now publicly suggested that pension funds could help finance aspects of Jamaica's reconstruction effort, while insisting such participation would not be forced. As at September 2025, 1 month before the hurricane, Jamaica's pension funds help approximately $847 billion in invested assets. That is the capital being discussed. The Prime Minister used Transjam Highway as his proof of concept, an infrastructure investment that has returned between 340 and 390% to shareholders since its IPO in 2020. But Transjam Highway was a completed operating asset. It was commercially structured, publicly listed, and open to price discovery on the Jamaica Stock Exchange. The reconstruction projects being proposed do not yet exist. They have not been structured, they have not been rated, they have not been made bankable. And as of today, the legislation required to advance even Phase 2 of pension reform has not been tabled in Parliament. Drafting instructions were only recently sent to the Chief Parliamentary Council. So tonight, Jamaica is really confronting 2 questions at the same time. How do we prepare more people for old age? And how do we finance national reconstruction without undermining confidence in the very systems people are being asked to trust with their future? Jody, it's back to you.
Thanks so much, Akeem, for that. Our overview was comprehensive, and our panel tonight will help us dig deep into the issues. Our panel is with us for the full program tonight. Helene Davis-White, General Secretary of the Jamaica Association of Local Government Officers, JALGO, joins us. We're also joined by Professor Andre Horton, economist, and Sanya Goff, president of the Pension Industry Association of Jamaica. Good evening to you all, and thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon to you too. Thanks for having us.
Hi, Julianne.
Thank you all for joining us. Sanya Goff, I pull you in first as president of the Pension Industry Association of Jamaica. Jamaica has spent years discussing growth, productivity, crime, and over the past few months, in more earnest reconstruction. But have we failed to adequately prepare for the fact that the country is simply getting older?
No, I don't think enough has been done. And I think we're now starting to pay attention a little bit more to the statistics and the fact that our old age dependency ratio is worsening, meaning there are going to be more people over 65 than in the working force, and what that means and what the implications of that. Because it does create this intergenerational poverty and intergenerational pressure that is going to be almost impossible to break if we don't put in place measures now to improve retirement security and create avenues for people to save in as frictionless a way as possible, which is what auto-enrollment is looking at, what micro-pensions looks at as well. So not enough has been done, but I do think there is a lot more attention being paid to the issue, and it is featuring a lot more in conversations nationally, and that's encouraging. It's now to ensure that we move from discussion and general agreement to actually implementing the legislative changes that are needed and the frameworks to support it.
Before we take a break, Sanya Goff, talk to Jamaicans. What is a pension and why does it matter as we look at the gap that we have and the concerns about demography that you've raised?
Well, a pension in simplest terms is a stream of income that you will receive after your formal working years. And so it's based on a structure where while you are formally working, you would save in a tax-deferred system, so it's different from a normal savings account, and that at the end of your formal working life, you will get a stream of income, periodic monthly payments usually, that will be almost a return for your investment and savings during your working life. And so it's best facilitated in the traditional employer-employee relationship. But as your opening video showed, more and more workers are moving away from the traditional working relationship. And so how do we find the solutions that are adaptable and creative to address the new work order, the new type of worker that we're seeing, the gig workers, informal workers, and as well as our low-income informal workers.
Let's talk about those workers. Helene Davis-White, just before we take a break, from a worker's perspective, how visible is retirement anxiety right now?
I think, our experience has been that the closer you get to retirement is the more it becomes a reality. So a lot of younger workers don't want to consider the fact that there may come a day when they will not be able to work. But certainly as trade unions, we have had to be able to educate because we would have seen what happens when someone retires and really doesn't have any form of steady income having retired. So we are fully on board in terms of ensuring that as many workers as possible are enrolled in a functioning pension arrangement. But I think some of the issues that Sanya raised are very important because of how the Jamaican labor force is organized today as against how it was in the past, with a lot of informal employment, a lot of young people choosing not to go into formal employment but actually are working for themselves as they would claim. And so we now have to relook our idea of pensions and how pensions are organized. And I think one of the things that was done in phase 1 of pension reform was to ensure that we had vehicles out there that individuals could access to be able to save toward their pensions through what are called the approved retirement schemes. But I think we need the reforms now to get to a point where more and more persons are hearing the tale and are coming on board as to ensuring that they do put aside something for those years when they will no longer be able to remain in informal employment.
Well, old age, new risk. That's what we'll continue discussing inside Lead Story Prime next.
JampJA.org. Mind your business, JA with Jump Online. Are your business? They keep your government in line.
Use the MP tracker. If you watch on them a move, the account meter help them improve.
Take action.
Use the Jump tool.
Track your MP cause they work for you. Mind your business, JA with Jump Online.
Let's monitor government at jampja.org, funded by the European Union.
Hi, I am Kendi Pangat.
What a guan?
What a guan?
That a guan pa.
What a guan? What a guan?
What a guan? Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 8 a.m., 1:30 p.m., and 10 p.m. on CVM TV.
And that's a guan pa. What a guan?
The internationally acclaimed On Stage with Winfred Williams.
At a new time, Saturdays at 8 p.m. on CVM TV.
So much more than entertainment.
Thanks so much for staying with us inside Lead Story Prime. We're discussing old age new risks, looking at pensions in Jamaica and the horror finding out that only about 12% of Jamaicans are in formal pension schemes. This, though, as we're being told that by 2050, about 20% of Jamaica will be over 60. That means that we're not quite ready for where we're going. Professor Andre Houghton is on line with us. Professor Houghton, having now heard the overview that Akeem Oret did earlier and now the comments being made by Sanya Gaffa and by Helene Davis-White, there have been concerns that have been raised about Jamaica's demographic transition. From an economic perspective, this change from a younger, more youthful population to an older population, what does that signal to you?
You know, they are right. We are facing an aging population where we have a significant amount of people matriculating to the pension age and not enough within the working population. And this is not just a challenge for Jamaica. Other countries are facing a similar sort of pattern. China, who are the manufacturers for the world, are facing that sort of situation as well, where they are encouraging people now, instead of them being limited to just having one child, they are now paying people to have children per month, per year, and so on, which is really encouraging them to have 3 and 4. And once upon a time, that was never heard of in China, right? So they have recognized that they need more children to be born to fill that working population gap. Japan also. And what does this mean for us? For Jamaica, when you look at, for example, income from a formal point of view, over 70% of workers earn less than 1.5 per year, right? And what does that mean? It means that they're earning somewhere about, say, a little over 100,000 per month. And a little over 100,000 per month, you're talking about that being divided by 4, you're talking about 25 to 30,000 per week. And with that amount of money, and you have a family, you have to pay rent, you have to pay utilities, you have to send them to school, you have to talk about health care. Then just from a formal standpoint, many of these people, just from what they earn, might not have enough to formally join a pension plan. However, the NIS provides sort of a buffer. But when you look at the Jamaican economy, you're talking about roughly 46% being informal. Then you're talking about those set of people, now, how are they going to access pension plans? And that is why there are banks, for example, JMMB and so on, who offer those sort of outside of the formal pension system types of instruments that persons can join. But when you talk to a Jamaican, they are not necessarily saving for retirement. They are put it aside for many about own levity, their own number one income stream with a number two income stream, a number three income stream. So many of them are of that particular frame of mind where they are not just thinking about retirement, they are thinking about to increase their income now. So that's where we have the challenge up front.
That upfront challenge is one that we have to confront because, as you said, incomes might be too small to deal with current day-to-day expenses. And as we've said, retirement for many, especially those just entering the work world, is far off. It will sort itself out in the future. But Sanya Goff, as president of the Pension Industry Association of Jamaica, the industry has repeatedly warned about low pension participation. We are now at a place where we're at about 11%, we could call it roughly 12%. That means almost 1 in 10 Jamaicans has a pension. That means 9 in 10 have no clue what happens after that. How dangerous is the current coverage gap?
Thanks, Jody. So what I just want to clarify the data point. Akeem was correct when he said about 11% in a private pension arrangement, and that's really the statistic with respect to private sector pension plans. But when you factor those workers who are part of the tourism workers pension scheme and the public sector workers who are part of the public sector arrangement, that number bounces up to about 18%. So it's that 10-11% is private sector specific, but it's not the full national number.
All right, so then 2 in 8, 1 in 4, that means 80% of the people have nothing coming to them.
Correct. Still bad.
A little better than the 90.
But a little better than 10. But yes, still unacceptable.
80% then have nothing coming to them and they have no clue of where that begins. What does that mean then for us, Sanya Goff?
It means old age poverty. It means a greater dependence on the state to support our elderly. It means increasing in taxes. It means limited social services for our young people, for our children, because we can't have our elderly suffering. And so it means that the state, we as young working people are going to have to support elderly because old age poverty would be the only consequence. And so that is what it means. So it means that we need to chart a course now to ensure that we alleviate this kind of crisis of old age poverty that we're facing our citizens. And the reality is that whilst there's a lot of, it's admirable to take care of your parents and ensure that they're okay, that can't be the plan. And especially when you have fewer children, more and more families or fewer children, the probability of finding a child that is going to look after you becomes slimmer and slimmer. That's just not a plan. That's not your pension plan. And so we have to find a way to break that cycle of interdependence and create avenues and opportunities for people to save in a way that they don't have to think about it, which is what auto-enrollment is seeking to do. And yes, auto-enrollment only speaks to the traditional worker, right? But that actually, it's low-hanging fruit and it will move the needle. It will have impact. And we do have to find solutions for other types of workers. Helene was correct. The labor force in Jamaica is nuanced. We don't just have traditional and non-traditional workers. Even within the non-traditional space, it's very nuanced. And so finding solutions that work for the different, types of worker that we have is a lot of work for the government and industry to do. But it's not too late. I wouldn't say it's too late, but auto-enrollment is part of that solution, and then there are other things that we should be exploring. Micropensions is another.
You said auto-enrollment so many times that there are people at home right now, Sanya Goff, going, what is she talking about? That is something that the Pension Industry Association of Jamaica has spent years asking for. It's something that Prime Minister Dr. Andrew Holness has now said that's on its way. What is auto-enrollment, and how does that move us from this dark 18% that you have highlighted earlier to now what could be higher numbers of persons having some sort of pension income in the future?
So Akeem hit the nail on the head when he gave his introduction. So the PIAJ has been advocating and lobbying for the implementation of its auto-enrollment proposal. It simply means that we move from an opt-in regime to an opt-out regime. Right now, if you're an employer does not have an obligation under law to set up a pension plan. Where an employer sets up a pension plan, you must participate in that pension plan. Few minor exceptions, but you must participate. You join an employer who has a pension plan, you must join the pension plan once you're permanent. If your employer does not have a pension plan, you would have to then take the step to find yourself in one of the 13 approved retirement schemes. So you have to take that step to opt into a retirement scheme arrangement. What we're proposing, this is the PIAJ, is that we implement auto-enrollment, which means statutorily employers will be obligated to put their employees into any one of the 13 retirement schemes where they don't have a pension plan. But it's not a tax. Employers do not have to contribute if they don't want to, and employees don't have to stay in if they don't want to. So it moves from an opt-in to an opt-out. You're going to be put in automatically, you're going to be automatically enrolled in the retirement scheme, but you can always opt out if you wish. The particular design feature though that we're proposing is that there will be automatic re-enrollment. So even if you opt out every year to 3 years, that's part of the proposal, you will be automatically re-enrolled. Because what studies show is that people want to save. They see the benefit of saving. When they opt out, it's not necessarily a permanent position or decision that I do not and I refuse to save for retirement. It may be that at this time, I have a health issue, something needs to be done, there are other more pressing financial needs, and so I don't have the capacity, and so I'm going to opt out. But we would auto re-enroll you to kind of increase that friction, that stickiness, and keeping you in the plan. As well as auto escalation. So when you're automatically enrolled, there will be a deduction from your salary of a certain percentage. The proposal is 3%, but that will be auto escalated by 0.5% over a period of time. You can always stop it, or you can always go beyond it. But it's just setting you up to start the savings process, because we've seen that people are not taking the step to opt in, to go into a plan. But once they're in, very few people come out.
Helene Davis-White, for you though, how do you ask people to lock away money for retirement during a period that Professor Houghton spoke of? High fuel costs, high food costs, fuel pressure, housing strain, general economic uncertainty. Let's take a break inside Lead Story Prime and hear from you on that, because this all sounds well and good if you're permanent and if you have the money to be able to do it. We'll continue after the break.
Lucozade, bring the energy. Unbeatable taste, new look.
Every dream conquered is another dream game. I land and I fly again like a jet plane. Headed straight in your direction, 'cause I'm wiser, one step closer. I'm winning 'cause I work so hard, and the music keeps on playing, and the people never say we are mash up tonight.
Start your journey with a Jane Bank Small Business Loan with small business loans with as little as $10,000 and up to $4 million.
The time is 8:30.
Hi, I am Candy Pang and
Watagwan.
Watagwan.
Datagwan pa.
Watagwan.
Watagwan. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 8 a.m., 1:30 p.m., and 10 p.m. on CVM TV.
25 teams, one dream. The first ever Popeyes Challenge Cup competition, this David versus Goliath tournament. The Popeyes Challenge Cup, Wednesday, May 13 at Draxhall Sports Complex. Gray's Inn versus Duncan's United at 4:30 p.m., followed by Limehall versus Wi-Fi United at 7:45 p.m. It's the Popeyes Challenge Cup, Wednesday, May 13 at Draxhall Sports Complex, live on CVM.
We are continuing to discuss old age, new risk and the risks that Jamaica is facing now that we're having an aging population, but unfortunately an unprepared one. We have with us President of the Pension Industry Association of Jamaica, Sanya Goff, economist at the UWI Mona campus, Professor Andre Horton, and the General Secretary of the Jamaica Association of Local Government Officers, JALGO, trade unionist Helene Davis-White. Helene Davis-White, are you with us? All right, so we're still...
Yes, I'm with you now.
Perfect. Glad to have you on with us. Helene Davis-White, the question was yours because it sounds exciting to have conversations with us about having money. But how do you ask people to lock away money for retirement during a period of high food costs, fuel pressure, housing strain, and general economic uncertainty? They need the money now.
Well, the truth is that, we have always had this problem. But one of the things that certainly I learned very early in my working life is that you should start planning for your retirement the first day you become employed. And that's something that, from my standpoint, I preach to workers so that even although you have difficulties, you have to plan for that day when you may not be any longer employed. The truth is that this situation or the challenge, crisis with pensions is really not new, which is one of the reasons why governments have actually been involved in pension reform. And part of the problem that we have in Jamaica is that we take very long to, make the changes that need to be made. So this process started in 1999 until we ended with the first phase of pension reform, the Pensions Act of 2004. And after that, we were supposed to be moving to phase 2, and it's now 2026, and we don't have phase 2 pension reform in place. And I think that is part of the difficulty with how we do business in Jamaica that really needs to be addressed. And it leads me to a particular point, because Sanya made the point that, the auto-enrollment may not suit everybody. And in fact, the Labour Market Reform Commission, in its report and its recommendations to the government, I think it was tabled in 2017, if my memory serves me right, they actually put forward that the National Insurance Scheme should be amended to separate the wage-related pension from the flat-rate pension, and that what should be established is something akin to a defined contribution scheme, where people could contribute to their pensions through the NIS, which is an option, I think, that is quite easy, because most people who are employed actually have to the members have to be registered under the national insurance scheme, whether or not it's a small employer or a large employer. And in addition, you can have persons who voluntarily contribute to the national insurance scheme as well. So I think that is something that also needs to be considered, because the problem with the NIS now and the pension that it pays out is that it is just one of the slew of benefits that is actually paid out. And the Labour Market Reform Commission felt that, there should be something more focused in terms of the provision of pensions through the national insurance scheme. And I think that is something that we really need to look at, because truth be told, when you do the research, Jamaica has one of the lowest contribution rates to pensions in the Caribbean. I think in the Caribbean, it is as high as 20%. And in Jamaica, we are at what, 5%, something like that. And it is just not enough to generate the kind of returns that will enable us to have pensions that are meaningful. So I think what we need to really move into, and I am happy that the Prime Minister indicated that they were willing to take on board auto enrollment. I think what we really need to move to is actual phase 2 reform that looks at all the other issues that were not dealt with in phase 1 pension reform.
Well, Professor Andre Horton, you are who I'm pressuring next, because this all sounds good and well if you are formally employed, and this works if you are permanent at your job. Jamaica has now more people on contract work, on gig arrangements, or in between short-term jobs. So who takes care of their retirement?
Yeah, and you are correct. The modern world now has presented a economic scenario where less people are looking for what we call stability of employment. Let me give you an example. I've been working in the same job for the last 15 years or so, since about 2011. My younger brother, who is in England, just got his PhD a couple of years ago. In about 5 years, he has switched about 3 or 4 jobs. So these young people know the job stability that you are looking for in order to develop that pension stability is just not there. The gig economy, you have other types of disruptions that are playing at the labor market. And fundamentally, when you talk about managing an economy, which is really how much should be extracted for taxes, what do the taxes do? How much should be extracted for pension? What do these pensions do? But the thing is that Jamaica has always had clever ways of really pooling capital together, whether it is for emergency or whether it is for long-term basis. But we have not yet solved this pension puzzle, because you recognize that even persons who are well employed, meaning are employed at the upper strata of their profession, at 65, they still can't retire. They have to continue working. I have several colleagues who after 65 still have to be working, who after 70 still have to be working. And what does this mean? Helen mentioned that of all the Caribbean countries, Jamaica has one of the lowest pension contributions, which corresponds to, of all the Caribbean countries, Jamaica has one of the lowest GDP per capita. And then we might want to overlook the GDP situation. But remember, GDP is calculated on value added. And what is value added? Value added is the extra amount that your country produce, and this is really the output of labor. What share of it does labor get compensated? Labor get compensated a share. So the more value added we have, the more we produce, the higher our GDP, then the more revenues persons have, and then the more they will feel inclined that what they have is sufficient enough to cover their short-term consumption patterns, as well as for them to save for the long run. In the informal economy, what I've noticed is that a lot of Jamaicans, they tend to have a different sort of pension, and the situation comes up with the children. Like poor people invest in their children. So like my mother invested in me. I mean, she has a pension, but she invested in me as the backup. And that happens a lot, right? Where parents, your child didn't attend university, you do your best so that they can go to university, you invest a lot. But on top of that is that they are really looking at other streams of earning income outside of the regular 9 to 5 that can carry on in the long term.
But is that also, Professor Houghton, a pressure not only on those persons whose parents or guardians might depend on them, but it also might be extra pressure because they are dealing with contract work, are unstable themselves, are not at the place where they expected to be, so they might not be able to take care of their parents. It's one of the reasons we've said that we have a lower birth rate, because persons have indicated they aren't able to take care of children, so they don't have any. Is that going to be now a problem that we have in taking care of our elderly?
Big problem, big problem. And countries who are more productive than us are facing that sort of problem. As I said, China and Japan are two of them. So imagine us now trying to save for our own pension and then trying to save for our parents' pension as well. And that creates a challenge where I saw one of my colleagues posted yesterday that this Mother's Day was the first time his grandmother didn't ask him when he's going to get a child. And he's saying to himself that, should I tell her that when I get a child, I'm going to have to stop sending her food and money every week? So there's a trade-off there to be made. And this trade-off must be taken into consideration. But the whole solution is really around economic management. I mean, from an individual standpoint, you can say start early and, small contributions, these sort of things. But just how the economy is structured, where companies can have persons working there for 10 years on contract, companies can have persons working there 15 years part-time. These sort of things have to be looked into, and changes have to be made in how we value the effort and the labor of our people.
Well, it's going to seriously be something that has to be considered. Let's take a quick break here inside Lead Story Prime and then look at what these pension funds could do, because the Prime Minister not only spoke about auto-enrollment being something that we could look to, he also said it might be useful to use pension funds for national development. We'll talk about that next inside Lead Story.
Day we use our feet to walk, run, and take us places. But your feet can do something even more amazing. Join Guardian Group's Shine 5K Night Run Walk and make a stride to support KPH, the Falmouth Hospital, and Project Star. Saturday, May 23 in Kingston and Saturday, May 30 in Montego Bay. Register at run2shineja.com or runningeventsja.com and see you at Guardian Group's Shine 5K Night Run Walk.
What is love? Love is when my uncle gave me the money to help start my shop. My auntie and I made her famous recipe even more delicious. And it starts with the best dressed chicken and a little extra love. No, my shop is famous to the people that matter the most to me, my community. So I only serve the best dressed chicken. Raised without antibiotics, it's only the best for my customers. If anyone's going to add something to my best dressed chicken, it's going to be me. Only the best can be called the best dressed chicken.
The internationally acclaimed On Stage with Winfred Williams.
At a new time, Saturdays at 8 p.m. on CVM TV.
So much more than entertainment.
Old age, new risks. That's what we're talking about this evening as we discuss pensions in Jamaica and whether we're prepared for retirement in this country. We have looked at quite a number of things, including low take-up rates of pensions in the country. But at the Pension Industry Association of Jamaica luncheon, there was an announcement. President Sania Goff, the announcement that was made there was about using pension-linked capital for national reconstruction and development, something that Prime Minister Holness said wouldn't be forced, but could be something that was considered. Is that normal, or is that post-Hurricane Melissa talking as we try to rebuild this country?
Sorry. It actually is quite normal for pension funds to contribute to infrastructure development or investment in economies. Pension funds are, long-term investors. When you think about the ultimate time span of when you would be drawing down on pension funds and returning them to their contributors, and so it's not unusual. What you have to ensure, though, is that trustees who are fiduciaries and the investment managers as well, the ultimate investment managers who are held accountable for the management of the funds, they have to ensure that they operate within a framework of prudence. And not every pension fund will have the same appetite for different investment opportunities. So there will be some funds that have a greater appetite for investing in equities, some versus real estate versus infrastructure. Right now, it's not prohibited to invest in an infrastructure project. Trans-Jamaica, the Prime Minister mentioned Trans-Jamaica as an example, but it has to be within the context of the existing framework for equities or bonds. And those asset classes have specific limits attached to them and specific conditions attached to them being eligible for pension funds to invest in. And so one of the considerations, and it was raised early in the year at this Jamaica Stock Exchange regional seminar that's held every year, finding safe, prudent ways to access pension fund monies to invest in infrastructure, and that may be requiring amendments to the existing legislation so that the limits that exist now around equities and bonds wouldn't fetter. If it is, pension funds wouldn't be fettered by those limits. If it is.
Well, Sania Goff there speaking with us, but she seems to have had an internet issue that's preventing us from hearing the rest of what she's saying. But she did speak about us potentially raising the limit of what those pension funds could invest in. Helene Davis-White, yes. And thanks so much for that, because that allows for us to understand that we're working within a legislative framework and that this is what we need to be looking at. Helene Davis-White, however, do you think the average worker currently trusts national institutions enough to feel comfortable with retirement-linked capital supporting infrastructure projects? Because Trans-Jamaica Highway existed. You could see it, you could touch it. All the things that we're now talking about rebuilding, none of them exist just yet.
Yeah. I think based on what is happening in the country, there is likely to be a lot of skepticism around it, but as Sania pointed out, it is something that's quite normal certainly in other societies. And as we speak now, the phase one reform enabled those kinds of investments to be made within the framework of what was established in the law. So there is nothing that actually prevents it right now. But I think a lot of workers are concerned if they believe that this is something that may be government linked. And a lot of work will have to be done to convince them that these are good investments that should be actually carried through, and that the trustees are the ones, I think, who will have to convince members of the individual schemes that these kinds of investments are in fact good investments, because we have the low trust environment that we are operating in now.
With that low trust environment, though, Helene Davis-White, there's also a question about what if it doesn't go well. So you could be patriotic, you could want to rebuild Jamaica, but if the reconstruction-linked investment fails or underperforms or even becomes controversial, who ultimately carries that risk?
Well, the risk is really to the members of the scheme, because then the returns to them will be reduced, or it may in fact it can in fact collapse, as has happened elsewhere in the world. So it is something that you have to take into account. That can happen as with any form of investment. But the reality is that you can sit on the money and expect that it will grow. You have to do something with it for it to grow, to be able to pay the pensions down the road when the time comes. So you just have to have astute trustees and managers, fund managers, who will be taking prudent decisions in terms of what happens with the funds invested, because the reality is that if you don't invest it, the returns to you will be very limited, because it is actually predicated on the notion that it has to be invested to be able to return, to make the returns, to make payments to pensioners when the time comes.
They're depending
on. Yes, Jordan. So a couple of things. One, it's not a patriotic investment. The fact is that it still needs to meet the right specific investment criteria. It needs to deliver the returns that are required for the particular fund. There is no free for all. I can tell you there are very strict quantitative and managed qualitative conditions that have to be met for any pension fund investment. Infrastructure wouldn't fall outside of that. It would just ensure that there is maybe some more latitude if this is a pure infrastructure project. And there are many instances where infrastructure projects are government backed. That's one aspect or one consideration that could be employed. But it's not driven by patriotism at all, because at the end of the day, the investment managers, the trustees, the actuaries play a role as well. The regulator plays a role in ensuring that prudence governs any of these investments, because as Helene says, the ultimate thing has to be the return to the members, and you have to balance trustees have to go for the highest investment with the highest return and the most acceptable level of risk for that plan.
For that plan, and for the people in that plan who are expecting then to see the money in their retirement years that they need to have in their hands. Let me just run through, though, as we close, so that we can get some tangibles for the people at home. Professor Horton, to you first. As we close, Jamaica is now looking at a system where we don't have enough people in pension schemes. We don't have everything worked out. What does this country look like in 20 years if we don't sort this out?
In 20 years, we're expected to have a slight decline in our population. That, coupled with the increase in pensioners, will create a sort of an oblong situation for firms and for the government. Fundamentally, the idea of reinvesting pension is important, because, as you know, pension is an investment that you want to see grow when it matures, when you get to 65. And Ethiopia, this year, we're able to use some of those pension funds to neglect an IMF loan and to build some infrastructure, including a dam. And as you know, for these infrastructural development, they have to do benefit cost ratio and so on, economic impact assessment, internal rate of return. So it's not just investing blindly, it's really looking at the lifetime of these investments and the rate of return on them.
So you're saying that we need to then see how we can get more people in for those sorts of infrastructure projects, like that massive dam that had been put in place in Ethiopia?
No, I am saying that Jamaica needs those sort of projects in order for us to become more productive, and our funds can become useful in situations like those.
Okay.
You following?
I am, and I certainly do understand then how infrastructure and development and the sort of rebuild that we're doing here in Jamaica then might contribute to that as we look at not only developing Jamaica but also making sure that people have the pension money when they need it. Helene Davis-White, just before we close, what do you believe is the danger of Jamaica right now? Are we in danger of growing old before we grow financially prepared?
Well, I think there's a very real risk that will happen, and I think we really need to zero in and try to ensure that we get as many persons on board in terms of this risk. In some societies, they have had to extend the retirement age to 67 from 65. And so that's an option that may actually be there. Some of us really don't want to work until 67, but that is a very real possibility. And I think added to which in Jamaica, now I represent social workers, and they'll tell you that you have fewer and fewer children who feel that they have an obligation to their parents.
And so that adds another burden.
A problem for the state.
Good, a burden on the state as well for them to deal with. Final word to you, Sanya Goff, as president of the Pension Industry Association of Jamaica. What's the single biggest policy mistake Jamaica must avoid right now?
Delay. We need to ensure that we move from just general agreement into concrete action. And so we need to push for phase 2. We need to get that reform in place. We need to get auto-enrollment on the books. We need to ensure that we're examining micropensions in a very serious way against the backdrop of our nuanced labor force. We need to look at what other countries are doing, what has worked, what hasn't worked, and really channel energy and resources into finding the solutions.
Well, you've all helped tonight for persons not only to understand the problems, but you've laid out solutions to us as well. Helene Davis-White, General Secretary of the Jamaica Association of Local Government Officers, JALGO, Professor Andre Horton, economist, and Sanya Goff, President of the Pension Industry Association of Jamaica. Thank you so very much for joining us. Jamaica's pension conversation is often...
Thank you. Have a wonderful afternoon, everyone.
It's so good to have you on. It's not just personal responsibility. That's what we started off with today. It is a bigger issue. Save more, plan better, think long term. But tonight's discussion also exposed that this is also a structural issue, because retirement security becomes far more difficult in an economy built around some of the things we talked about: contract work, income instability, high living costs, and low public trust. Thanks so much for joining us inside another edition of Lead Story Prime tonight. Up next, we have Fan Central. Have a good night.
Tune in to Lead Story, weekdays at 6 p.m. Hosted by Jody Ann Quarry.
Hi, I am Candy Pang.
What a guan?
What a guan?
That a guan pa.
What a guan? What a guan?
What a guan? Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 8 a.m., 1:30 p.m., and 10 p.m. on CVM TV.
And that's a guan pa. What a guan?
Every dream conquered is another dream game. I land and I fly again like a jet plane. Headed straight in your direction, 'cause I'm wiser, one step closer. I'm winning 'cause I work so hard. And the music keeps on playing, and the people them I say we are mash up the dance. Oh, what a feeling! Don't stop dreaming. Keep on believing in the power of the feeling. Whatever you want, take a chance. Song in your heart, step in your dance. You got the spark, don't fit the dark. Shine your lights on.
What is the Popeyes Challenge Cup? The Popeyes Challenge Cup is Jamaica's newest and boldest football competition, featuring David versus Goliath matchups as the best of the best in the country's club football take on those in the second tier of club football. It's a straight knockout competition